Hello, everyone, and good whatever moment of this wonderful day you are enjoying on your time zones. Happy Monday if you still live in a Monday. Happy very early Tuesday if you are already in the future. It is such a joy to welcome you to yet another conversation part of our April series. And today we will be discussing about effective conflict resolution and even more meaningfully so, about frameworks for managing workplace disputes. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co host for the next hour. We have Jessa taking care of us backstage, and we have an amazing lineup of speakers who took the time and the energy and the commitment to be here. Now, I will ask Jessa to help me bring them on the stage. In the meantime, I see that we already have comments coming in. Do let us know where you're listening to us or where you're watching us from. And this way, we will also travel around the world vicariously. And also, please do consider the comments your conversation space, and that is your conversation space just as much as it is our panelists. So drop your comments, your thoughts, your ideas, your own stories, and do help us all grow from there. I do see that between us on the screen, we cover pretty much all the time zones. I see Alex from the future. I'm right in the middle from Switzerland. And then I see a variety of US time zones. So let's make the most out of our time here together. And what I will do, I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen. Counterclockwise, I decided I will do something different this Monday morning, or Tuesday morning for Alex. And I will ask you to first just shortly introduce yourselves. And also, what made you decide that this is the panel that you will put your time and energy into? What makes conflict resolution a meaningful topic for you personally? Alex, it's so good to see you back on my screen. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Kia ora, Alex Howson. I work in HR over here in Sky TV in New Zealand. I suppose conflict resolution, I really think that particularly in our culture down here in New Zealand where conflict is normally avoided, we have a different type of resolution with regards to a little bit more in a passive sense that a challenging conflict is really, really healthy in businesses. And I really like to talk about how we can get people having meaningful conversations in respectful challenge. So that is that's why this one really interested me. I'm really looking forward to my fellow panelists and those people who are on the call this morning to hear about their experiences as well.
Thank you so very much. Nikki, welcome. Good to see you.
Hello and good morning, good day to those current and the future as mentioned. I'm really, really glad to be here. So I have had, 20 years of experience in talent management and, working both in private sector and in collective bargaining agreements. This conversation really resonated because the frameworks, in one instance, you have a very structured framework in order to, resolve conflict and grievances. And then when you're in private sector where you may not have, very clear policies in some cases, or not such a structured approach, it varies. And then there's some similarities either way. So I've been working in HR for, like I said, 20 years. I'm currently on a sabbatical. I needed a break, a mental health break. And so I'm very fortunate and blessed to take this time off. And so we'll be kind of re-entering into the market in a few months, just after I feel like I've had enough time, but serving as a chief people officer for the past 6+ years.
Thank you so very much. Lucy, welcome. A joy to have you back in our conversations.
Hi, Manolo. Thanks so much. My name is Lucy Georgiadis. I am the CEO and co-founder of Elevate Leadership. We do coaching, we do live workshops, and we have a membership platform with short 5 to 10 minute classes on all the critical management topics, of which conflict is one of them. And I've done many thousands and thousands of hours of coaching over the last 13, 14 years. And as you can imagine, conflict comes up a lot. So this was a topic that was very close to my heart, which is why I chose this panel. And I've had to help many people all the way through from like top execs, all the way through line managers in how to understand conflict a bit better, and some frameworks to use to really help resolve that either for yourself or for team members where you're having to step in and mediate. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and also learning from the other panelists here too.
Thank you. And making our panel wholesome and complete, Dr. Gina, good to see you.
Good to see you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone around the world. I'm Dr. Gina Davis. I'm an organizational psychologist, executive coach, and founder and CEO of True Synergy, Inc., based in Los Angeles, California. We are a people and culture management consulting company, and we specialize in corporate culture change and behavioral transformation for high growth companies. This topic is very dear to me because I share with my clients that conflict is a good thing. It's an opportunity to solve problems and for people to learn, grow, and advance. So I look forward to discussing with the other panelists the frameworks, the different frameworks, and not to be scared of conflict, because conflict is actually a good thing. Let's talk about it. Thank you.
It makes my heart so happy to see how different lenses we bring into the conversation. And I promise that I will try to speak as little as possible. I'm fully aware that I sound like Donald Duck. It's the result of a weekend in Frankfurt. But this is the space of the panelists and not mine. But before we dive into more technical aspects of the frameworks, I really do want to take a few minutes and outline the space of our conversation. And I would particularly want to pick up on 2 points. One that Alex made very, very early on around the cultural dimension of conflict. And the other one that Dr. Gina just brought into the conversation, that conflict is not always a negative expression and a negative event. Actually, there's more and more research. I'm sure everybody here today heard about it or read it, on how healthy, open conflict is a sign of a positive organizational culture. Now, let's delve a little bit on this. What is good conflict? What is bad conflict? And is there such a thing as a cultural filter that prompts us to move conflict towards one or the other end of the spectrum? And what I will do, I will let this question out there, and we will consider this the round when you test your unmuting capability, and we will do it popcorn style wherever inspiration strikes. Dr. Gina, I see you unmuted, so
yes,
please.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, see, we specialize in behavior. So conflict, in my humble opinion, and there's research behind this too, but in my humble opinion, that conflict can be a bad thing. It's based on behavior. It's how you behave when you're dealing with conflict. If you are not willing to listen, you're yelling and screaming at each other, you're not understand people's different personality styles, people's different ways of interacting. If you don't have strong emotional intelligence, it could be a really big problem. But if you understand the power dynamics of behavior and being able to listen, understand, may not always agree, but listen for that understanding, that is the start of healthy conflict. And I really don't like the word conflict, because conflict does carry a negative connotation. But to be honest, when it's about learning how to understand yourself, understand others, and behaving appropriately.
Thank you. Nikki, I saw you unmuted, and we will go Nikki and Alex, because Alex, I saw you also unmuted there for a few seconds. So Nikki.
Yeah, I agree with everything said. And, to the question of when is it maybe necessary to move the organization or in one direction or another, I found that where conflict aversion is happening and it's stemming innovation, it's not, allowing people to voice productive, I always believe in productive conflict. And so when it's not allowing people to give feedback, critical feedback that is in the spirit of the work, right? And so either the work is not advancing in the most innovative way or the most effective way or efficient way because people are avoiding conflict. That's one area that I have, observed and experienced in moving the organization towards more productive and healthy conflict versus, trying to be averse.
Mhm. Thank you. Alex.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that the term conflict has such a negative connotation, unfortunately, and that's really sad because the way that we explore, if we think about what is conflict, it's about exploring problems, and it is your reaction to it that makes it the negative. And so I think if you and the way that I've always said and talked about conflict, if you flip the narrative and you talk about conflict in terms of difference or collaboration or innovation or some thought leadership, what is it that we're talking about here? I just don't agree with you. That's really different to actually having an argument about it. And even that word argument has different connotation. So I think it is around it and its responsibility in the frameworks that we'll be talking about today about flipping that narrative really quickly, really early on when that word comes up. There's nothing wrong with it. Only what's wrong with it is if you are disrespectful and behave in a way that's offensive, really, rather than the conflict itself.
Lucy.
Yes. And Alex, I love that point around it's really how the difference between conflict and healthy conflict and toxic conflict, I suppose, is really how it feels to you and the other people in the room. And when you you can start to feel when it becomes uncomfortable and toxic. And actually, and Alex brings up a great point. It's the belief systems you have. It's like just like Albert Ellis's ABC model, grandfather of cognitive behavioral therapy, that it's the beliefs you have that color the emotion that you have around the situation. And so it's in changing the beliefs that we have around conflict and what they mean to us, and the beliefs that we have maybe around the other person that we're having a fruity discussion with, that really change that consequent emotion that we have and flip that switch between it being what feels like a unhealthy conflict into feeling like a healthy conflict. And it reminds me of Patrick Lencioni's work when he has this conflict continuum. There's this spectrum where you have like artificial harmony on one side, and then you have mean-spirited attacks on the other side. And then if you imagine a midpoint in that spectrum, this sort of ideal point of conflict is actually only just over the line into the artificial harmony, right side of it. It's actually much closer to the mean-spirited attacks than you think it is, and that it feels natural to be in. But it's then when we start to get a lot more creative and we can really push boundaries. But it is all about how we sort of feel in the moment.
I love this conversation around values and behaviors. I see a lot of great comments coming in also from people in the audience. I am wondering, with everything that has been changing in our workplaces and to, in full honesty, in our lives, I'm wondering, do you see any new trends in the topics that spark conflict within the workplace? And do you see that there are some themes of conflicts that we will see popping up more and more, so that we can sort of like prepare for them? And Nikki, I would love to hear from you on this one, and then everybody, the drill. The unmuting competition will be officially open, and you just build your conversation. So, Nikki.
Yeah, interestingly enough, as we have shifted to being more transparent about equity and how equity impacts our business decisions and the kind of environments that we're looking to, promote inclusivity, equity, diversity, I've noticed a trend where there is conflict that arises, depending on who the represented members of the conflict are, it jumps straight to, in some cases, it has jumped straight to, this thing is happening to me because I am a woman, or this thing is happening to me because I'm a person of color, right? Or this thing is happening to me because I'm a junior member of the team. And so it kind of, the resolution or kind of thinking for the other person and why this thing is happening and why someone is experiencing the conflict that they are, jumps straight to that. So that's a trend. And so separating out and really understanding what the root of the conflict is, and first deciding who is the best person to even address. First, like, what is happening? How severe is this? How emotional? How are people experiencing this thing? And how is it impacting how they're showing up? And of course, the harmony for a productive work environment, because it could get other people involved as well. So having to deal with that to really fact find, but also separate out and have people understand, and not jump and leap there, because sometimes it is that, but not leap there, but really focus on what exactly is happening, what is the impact, and then working on the framework there. So kind of conflating the two, I see is an increase. I have experienced as an increase.
Thank you, Nikki. Lucy.
I was going to say very similar, Nikki, as well. In our client companies, our HR counterparts that we work really closely with, when we put together these programs, the finding that it is I definitely +1 what Nikki says, and I think what I'm also seeing, in addition to more difficult conversations around diversity, which people are often ill-equipped to have, I have to say, that sometimes, because people are now in a distributed workforce much more, there's fewer, people that, especially around tech and anyone that can be hybrid, they're only coming to the office 2 or 3 maximum times a week. And that creates a lot of new issues with conflict that we didn't see so much of before, and actually just managers themselves being making an extra effort when they have remote people on their team to set clear enough expectations with people, to be completely clear on roles and responsibilities in a way which they didn't have to be quite maybe so clear on, because they were kind of there with everybody all together. Also, just making sure that everybody has just got absolute alignment around priorities and how urgent tasks are, which needs to be a lot more concrete when you're remote. Making sure that they really do give much more timely and good quality feedback to those that they're not in an office with day to day. And also looking at whether there's any we found a lot of conflicts arising from, it feels like it's over here, but it's actually way over here, where there's processes or communication cadences on the team which are confusing or unhelpful in some way, which really leads to conflict happening as well. So it's sort of tightening up all those areas around management, good practice management as well, which we found leads to conflict.
Dr. Gina.
Yeah, I agree with both Lucy and Nikki. The pendulum keeps swinging. It just keeps swinging, and it is really. I go back to behavior. It's really important as people leaders to understand and get clear and accept. We all have biases. We all have experiences. And to really get clear in understanding our own biases, our own experiences, and be clear about that first and foremost. And then when it comes to working with others in the people and culture space or the HR space, whichever one you choose, and being, again, like what Lucy's saying, just being clear about expectations. Also understanding that people have different experiences. They come from different backgrounds. They understand differently. They hear differently. They comprehend differently. Common sense is not always common. So it's really important that we have these clear, and ask questions. Ask a lot of questions, so that you understand as a people leader, it is your responsibility to make sure your employees that they understand the work, that they are in agreement, that they understand the goals and objectives and the values and the policies. And if they don't, work with them to help them understand those things. It's just really important, but it really begins and ends with us as individuals. Before we can have any type of transformation or any change, it begins with us first.
I do want to jump in on one thing Dr. Gina just mentioned in terms of culture, policies, practices, protocols. I 100% agree. And one thing that we as leaders can think about, we know that conflict is inevitable, but doing an audit on our culture and our values, like what are we actually communicating, right? What are our leaders communicating? How do leaders respond? How have they responded to conflict thus far? Does the employee handbook have a code of conduct, number one, right? Because conflict, there are different levels. There are conflict that it's about like workplace conflict or dynamics, interpersonal dynamics. Maybe sometimes things are just not a right fit. But then some things can lead to toxicity. Some things can lead to hostile work environment. Now you're getting into like EEO space, right? But, you know, can they point to your code of conduct? Do they understand what is expected of them? Do they understand what would happen if someone reports you as contributing towards a toxic environment or hostile environment? Do you understand what those protocols are? And do you know where to go to understand what is expected of you? And so that there are no surprises, right? So those are things in terms of laying the foundation and the framework. And what is your communication policy? How often is it communicated about code of conduct and the values of the organization? And is that part of your onboarding? Is that something that is refreshed annually, you know, outside of compliance mandates or trainings? Like the culture and what do you stand for as leaders? I think that's all really important. And then also you put that on paper, but is it lived, right? And that's what's really important as well. So not waiting until conflict happens, being proactive for both risk management, but also for the experience of people. Like you want people to have like a positive, safe experience. And so a lot of proactivity and opportunity for proactivity here as well.
Thank you so much. Alex.
Nikki, you took the words out of my mouth. I think I was going to say with regards to, you know, not normally we don't engage in a process without knowing the rules. And I think that part of an organization's superpower is being really clear about what they stand for really quickly. And that in there, you know, we shouldn't be frightened of saying, look, the ground rules look like this. And not that we would jump to consequence, but you know, it's our expectations that we're providing you a psychologically safe environment to have discussions all the time for, you know, to increase your productivity, to make you feel like you're contributing, and to ensure that everybody has a voice. And having those, what we know is that if those aren't in place, that there are a lot of groups of people that just wouldn't have any type of airtime. And that their lived experience would never come to the table. So whether or not you come from the perspective of just doing the right thing, and we would hope that that's where most people do, but let's also talk to the audience that says it's just not commercially clever to leave out a whole heap of people just because you've decided that there is the loudest voice wins over the top. And in terms of a part, you know, I mean, we all can talk about the various parts of the law of the countries within which that we live, but it's really, that's a last resort. But having those foundations, though, make it really important to build your company values or that sort of team culture to say, here's our foundation, and hopefully we never have to get there, because that's the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. However, it's clear, and this is our expectations generally. But on top of that, as a team, these are the things that we hold really close to our heart to ensure that all of you have a really cool experience here at work, and also the organisation benefits from all your collective thinking. So that, you know, it's those combination of the two that I do think is really important to be quite overt about. Yes, there's nothing wrong with that as well. Is stating the ground rules straight off the bat.
Well, the next question can equally be a trigger or a glimmer for everybody in the HR community. But what I'm really curious about is, how can we as HR professionals make the best decision on when to intervene and when to just create the space and grace around the parties involved in a conflict to, for them to sort it out themselves? And Lucy, I would invite you to lead us into this one.
I was hoping you wouldn't, because I was going to be like, oh, I'm interested to see what the HR professionals say. But I suppose in my experience on this, and it's quite a quick rule of thumb, and I'm sure the other three folks will be like, yes, and with as humans, we don't seem to be naturally that great at resolving conflict on our own. And that is because when our amygdala is triggered and we go into that fight, flight, or freeze, we tend to make poor decisions about what to say and what to do. And that is what snowballs conflict often. And sometimes individuals are incredibly capable of resolving conflict on their own. Sometimes they may need a little bit of coaching from their manager or from the HR or people team to have a more productive conversation with the person that they're in conflict with. But I would say in general from experience, if they have tried to genuinely sit down together, the people that are in conflict, twice, and they haven't managed to resolve that situation after two in-depth conversations around it, then I would say it is really helpful to go in and help them mediate. That would be my kind of rule of thumb on this, because if you let them sit down a third time or a fourth time, if they haven't managed to see some kind of, way forwards in two conversations, they're going to find it really hard in a third one and a fourth one. So it doesn't really matter if their manager has tried to help them or whatever, but as an HR professional, I'd say if they've tried twice, I would intervene on the third.
Dr. Gina.
I think that's great. I do. I think that's great, Lucy. And I would say, ask them, do you need my help? Would you like for me to go into this meeting with you? Everybody has, and so here comes the psych in me. Everybody has different personality types and different communication styles. And the people that are directors, that are very direct in their communication style, may not need as much help as someone with a relator style that doesn't like conflict, that doesn't, that wants to get along with everybody, that is more passive. Some people are more conscientious, where they're focused on the facts, just the facts, ma'am, and they may get in conflict with someone who might be more of an expressive type that talks a lot, that's really leads with their emotions. So it's going to depend on their personality type and communication styles. But if, as an HR professional, ask the question and let them tell you what they need, instead of just leading or wanting to just intervene, because they might resolve it themselves. They may not. And it really also depends on the level of leadership. Is it the senior leader having conflict with the individual contributor, or the subordinate? What's the issue at hand? And that will also determine whether or not to get involved.
+1 to both Lucy and Dr. Gina. And the other thing is, sometimes you as an HR professional, when things land on your desk or it gets to your attention, in some cases, I'll speak for myself, it's when things have escalated, right? At the same time, when something comes to me in an offhand way, let's say we're in the kitchen and someone just mentions an issue, while they're coming to me not in official capacity, I'm listening for certain certain things, right? Whether to Dr. Gina's point, are they looking for an ear? Does it require some coaching? Does it mean let's talk about this for 5 minutes? So you're about to have a conversation with this person. Let's prep and just, help me to understand what's going on and what your approach, right? So sometimes it's that, but 100% where it does require, from my perspective, immediate intervention is when things are put in writing, right? When someone is putting it in writing and they're using words like discrimination, I'm being harassed, I'm being discriminated against, words that are like things that like become discoverable, things that become now an issue of risk management. I feel like this is racism, or my leader or my manager is contributing to this. It's creating a toxic work environment. You're listening for certain things that it's obvious that is a direct, is an immediate need to get involved for all sorts of levels. And getting involved still requires a strategy. It doesn't mean that you're the one to jump in, but it does require assessing, okay, what are the immediate next steps versus letting things just play out.
Yeah, I think, agreed. And I think the role of HR is that sort of independence, consistency, and that sort of mediated, the listener in these environments. And I think it really doesn't matter from a perspective. For me, sort of some of the practice that I do is to ensure that I am quite over the top and almost in a menu type of style. If you'd like our help, it could look like this, and be really clear about what we are there to do if we were to intervene, or what we were not going to do, because I think that's part of it, is to try and listen also for, if in the more extreme, is this actually going to turn up as a whistleblower? How extreme are we talking? So it is really important that you are gauging what that person's saying to you, and also working out the level to which you intervene. From a framework perspective, I'd always start off in the mediation sense and just trying to help people facilitate a conversation, as opposed to using the word mediation. Here it has a bit of a legal connotation here, or you are halfway on your way to court if you're using that word. In fact, but I love it. I love doing that process. But it is more around the listening for me.
Well, we are a couple of minutes into the second half of our time here today. And I do want to keep us honest on the promise in the title of the panel that we will also be discussing frameworks. I will just take a few seconds just to welcome everyone who joined a little bit later. And in case you missed a bit at the beginning, or you have to drop off before we wrap this up, you can always go back and check the recording either in our LinkedIn space or through hackinghrlab.io. So no worries there. You can enjoy this conversation again or recommend it. Now, frameworks for managing workplace disputes. Is there a framework or a model or a sequence of particularly meaningful steps that you found have helped you in your work? And Dr. Gina, please lead us into this slice of the conversation.
Oh, wow. First, a framework that I really like and that I learned in my doctoral program by a professor that I really love, Jackie Ryle, is called interest-based conflict. And it's an approach where everyone comes to the table and understand each other better, understand what the topic is, number one. And then what is everyone's interest? What are they trying to achieve? And everyone's listening to everyone and allowing people, their passion, their emotion, whatever it is, and you're listening, and everybody gets an opportunity to give their interest. So you ask the question, what are your interests? When you're engaged, when there's an issue at hand and everyone has different perspectives on this, what are your interests? and being able to understand, and there's steps that you would go through. I don't know if you want me to go through them now or later, but there's definitely steps that you would go to get to this, to resolution. Because when it comes to interest-based conflict, everyone has a goal. There's the same goal, the same outcome, but different approaches on how we would get there. And once you hear the interest, then out of everyone giving that their point of view on their interests, you're listening for things that are the same. There might be different ways of getting there, but it's the same interest. And when you're all in agreement with that, then you can continue to move on in the discussion. So I'll stop right there.
I was thinking maybe it would help people in the audience if we outline a framework, we also go through the steps so that it's not hiccupy when we have to come back and then put the steps. So if I can ask, I will ask Dr. Gina if you can take us, in a value dense way through the steps. And then as you come into the conversation, the framework and the steps, would that work for everybody? Perfect. So Dr. Gina, please.
Okay. So I have my notes here. So interest-based approach to conflict resolution. So step one, there's 5 steps, everyone. Step one, so you want to identify the issue or the problem at the center of the conflict. What's it about? What are we here for? What's the outcome that we're all looking for? Step number 2, identifying and sharing interests. So what are your interests? I said that before. What are your interests? What each person cares about as it relates to the conflict. Step number 3 is developing options. So as everyone's giving their interest, what do they care about? What's important to them? Then throwing options on the table. So everyone's giving different options. Doesn't mean that you're going to accept my option. Doesn't mean I'm going to accept your option. But you're putting all of these different options on the table. Okay. And it's related to everyone's interests. Step number 4 is selecting the option or the options that everyone can agree on. 9 times out of 10, there is something in those options that we can all lean into because we're all looking to solve a problem, right? So once we see what's going on, if there's an option that we all can agree on, we lean into that. Okay. Step number 5 is committing to a win-win solution. The parties to the conflict arrive at a consensus and an agreement on the solutions and then the future actions. So those are the 5 steps to interest-based conflict. In most cases, this particular framework definitely works if everyone is in agreement to the approach.
Thank you so very much. Who wants to go next? Lucy.
I don't mind going next. So I think what I'm imagining is going to happen when we give like our frameworks is that there's definitely going to be an arc to them, which is very similar. And I think that's great. And that when we share the different steps, those who are listening and writing this down as you go, you can blend a bit here and there as you like. You can take some pieces, but I'd say keep the overall arc in mind because there definitely is like, it's kind of share, get the goals, say what you think, and then make sure you leave with action items. There's always like those 3 like major steps, I think, in conflict resolution frameworks. And so take whichever pieces you like from these, but do make sure that you follow that arc, because otherwise you'll either not have shared goals, or you'll leave with no action items, or people won't feel heard, or more of those 3 things. Okay, so this is this actually isn't one which has got any particular grounding other than many years of coaching. And I've done conflict mediation. We'll call them mediations, even though I know that's a little bit of it's a trigger word in as you've said, Alex, in some areas. But if you're having to go in and facilitate a discussion with 2 people who are in conflict, I'd say first off, before you go into that, you do make sure that you have separate conversations with both parties. Don't have a conversation with one and then and then be like, great, we need a mediation, and bring the other one in. You do make sure you have private conversations with both, because those private conversations will really help you set the emotional tone of the conversation, understand things from both people's perspectives, and will really help you navigate the conversation when they come together. It'll also give you a chance to make sure, exactly as Dr. Gina says, that both parties are on board. You cannot, it's very hard to do a mediation when one party is not remotely interested in fixing the issue. That is going to be very difficult. So if that is the case, I know someone's actually asked this in the chat here. So Mike, I hope I pronounced that correctly. But what happens if one person does not think there is a conflict and does not want to engage? Well, part of the prep work is going to be helping them understand the situation from the other person's perspective, so they do understand that there is a conflict and they can come to the table with an open mind. So I'd say this is Elevate's conflict mediation model. And again, it's 5 steps, and you'll see the similarities, I'm sure. Number 1, we teach people to set the context in the emotional tone. That's like number 1. So you want to say something like, I know that you're not seeing eye to eye in this situation, and I can see that it's been upsetting to both of you, or something along those lines, but I'm really optimistic we can work this out. So you're kind of going into the conversation with some optimism. And then if you can, you want to really share something about their shared history, which brings them a bit closer together. So something like, you both have really complementary skill sets and have the ability in the past to bring the very best out in each other, something which kind of connects them together. So the intent is there. Then step 2 is reminding them of their shared goal. Now, hopefully in the previous conversations, you've figured out their shared goal, but you definitely, if you haven't, this is definitely the part of the conversation that you want to make sure that you nail. So if you think the pair can come up with it on their own, then that is fantastic. In my experience, though, mediating conflicts, it's nice if they do, because it gives them that shared ownership. If they can't come up with anything, I'd make sure that you propose some shared goals. Do you both agree that your relationship is important and that you're both committed to making it better? Great. I know you're both very valued members of the same team here, working together towards the same goals. So at least that can be there if they are struggling themselves. Then number 3, I'd say you want to set some ground rules before you launch into the conversation. And again, it is best if the pair can come up with these ground rules for themselves so that they own those. But if they can't, I'd suggest 2 main ones: no interrupting each other and respectful language only. We want to create that safe space for people to feel like they can share. Then number 4 in the step process is let them take turns to share. Obviously, they're going to not be interrupting each other, we hope, but you want to make sure that they talk about their situation from their perspective. And you can prompt them, if necessary, by asking how they're feeling about the situation, what they'd like to see change. It doesn't really matter who goes first, but as the mediator, you need to make sure that you're upholding any ground rules. For example, you need to cut in if somebody interrupts, give the floor back to the right person. Okay, and then number 5, once they've shared, is you want to make sure that you agree on those commitments. After they've listened to each other and discussed the situation, you really want to encourage them to decide what they want to do differently, what commitments can they make to each other to make progress with the situation and move forwards, and help them look for some creative ways to solve that issue from a slightly different approach. Make sure that you've written them down. And I'd say before you leave the room, just make sure you've scheduled a follow-up with them before you leave the conversation, because the thing is unlikely to be resolved in one conversation. If it is, massive kudos, that is fantastic. But if it's not, you may want to schedule another 30-minute conversation in a week or 2 weeks' time, just to touch base with the 2 of them together in the same room to see how it's going.
Just making sure that I will not forget something, but listening to what Dr. Gina and Lucy already shared, and Alex and Nikki, I will give the floor back to you in a few seconds. One of the things that I learned is that many of us, we live in environments where English is not everybody's mother tongue, maybe not even their second language. So one of the ground rules that I oftentimes use in holding space for people is before you reply with the first subtitle that, you know, springs in your mind, make sure, especially if they, you know, if there are people of different nationalities trying to manage it in English, that you understand the meaning of what they're communicating, and you don't jump to the first dictionary description of the word that comes to your mind. So I do feel that that is a good thing to call out. So thank you.
Very important. Very
Alex,
important.
yeah. Alex, Nikki, who wants to stay safe from the hot seat of going last? Alex.
What Gina's been describing, I was going to say, interest-based problem solving is the methodology that I used all the time, and I think that understanding people's positions, so where are you coming from, is the I suppose real tip that I could give anybody is that it is extremely time consuming what it looks like on the face of it. So when you are going into where you would say sort of an interest-based problem solving methodology in conflict, you think, well, it looks like it takes a lot of time because you're doing a lot of preparation. The person facilitating it is doing a lot of preparation. You could be in a meeting that spans several hours. But what I have found over the course of using this as a methodology, it's a lot it's a lot less time consuming than a workplace dispute. It's a lot less hurtful, which take up a lot of time. It's a lot less expensive. There's a lot less of lots of stuff that make that first investment of time really it pays itself back for sure. A couple of other tips were around making sure, I was going to talk about the understanding, so having that mutual understanding, but also spending time in the, as Lucy said, pre-meeting, I suppose, is another way of putting the preparation of understanding really deeply as the person that would be facilitating what people's positions are and why they formed them, as much as you can, and helping them understand why they've formed them as well. Because really the key is the commonality. That they're putting as much common ground on the table really quickly to say, look, you came in, we're thinking that you were coming from quite different positions, but when and you in your mind had jumped to solving the problem yourself by an outcome that you think is the best thing for you. But when we look at everybody, let's talk about the outcome. I think there's a common theme here. We want to get to one, even if that is your common theme. So being quite over the top, really expressive around how, as I said earlier in the call, being really clever but overt about what you're doing when you're doing it, to ensure that people are maintaining that feeling of psychological safety all the way through, and that expectation of not being surprised in what could be quite a volatile situation, but making sure that people feel that they're holding the control and that you're just facilitating to make sure that everybody is comfortable in the process.
Nikki.
Yes, so I am last. So obviously, between Lucy, Dr. Gina, and Alex, given a wealth of information, and I also use interest-based conflict resolution as the strategy. Depending on the situations, many can be resolved there. But I will say that I go back to like the prep, and we talked about the pre-meeting and the pre-work and really assessing the situation. There are times where it's not about just the two people at the table that you're mediating, and there are other dynamics at play. So really having discernment to determine, like getting to the root cause. Of course, how people are experiencing whatever's happening is real. And so that's where, the mediation is going to be important for them to effectively manage what's in their locus of control. But as leaders and understanding their interests in the issue. But as leaders, we, especially HR professionals, coaches, or, you know, when we're in the space of mediating, we have to really understand who are the right people to have this conversation. Because I've had instances where managers feel like they're the right one. I want to be the one to lead this conversation and talk to them. When in actuality, the manager is the root of the issue, right? Not setting clear expectations, having a reputation of having favoritism. So if you're going to sit down and mediate or try to get to a resolution, if people are walking in the room already not trusting the process because they don't respect the neutrality of who is leading the conversation, or the mutual interest of the potential resolution because they already believe that the environment is not to their individual favor, that's going to negate all of our efforts, no matter how, you know, effective the framework work is that you're using. The how you come to the table is very, very important, and thinking about what can be achieved at the conversation at the table with these two people, but what work needs to happen maybe from the leadership level. Maybe it needs to be escalated because it has a broader organizational impact, and it's not just about these two individuals. The only other tip that I would add is that in the conversation, while, you know, having everyone having shared agreements on how we're going to have this conversation, encouraging I statements. And so in terms of listening, not interrupting, but if you do need to intervene, you know, just listen for when people are, you know, saying, well, you always do this and you do this, but first, you know, taking it to I and encouraging reframing, right? Well, how about you talk about how this impacts you? So when this thing is happening, talk about like what it means for you to have to like always be the one to like lead the meeting or have to like pick up the slack where there has not been communication clearly, or you're not aware of what's happening and what that means for how you approach the work. Or, you know, just encouraging I statements to keep it from becoming accusatory, but more so focusing on this is the impact to me. This is how I'm feeling. This is how I'm processing what's happening. And how I'm interpreting what's happening. Like that's important because it's about a person's individual interpretation of a situation, both people on both sides.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe that we are in the final 10 minutes, and I'm sure it's not just me, but if I only read the comments, there's so much energy in this conversation to go on for at least one more hour, if not an entire series. I really want to ask a question around the skills underpinning meaningful conflict resolution and facilitating meaningful conversations in the workplace. So you all know by now, I always promise extra ice cream for skills that are maybe not automatically or normally associated with conflict resolution. So any skills that are critical for HR professionals when they are called into doing this type of work. And Alex, I will give you the e-mic for this one to go first.
Thank you. I think it's starting is it's very practiced for the facilitator, really practice and consistent feedback skills. And so listening's critical, obviously, but being able to have respectful feedback skills as part of the toolkit's critical insofar as that it's natural to you and it looks natural and authentic to you. And that is part of, I think, Nikki, what you were saying with regards to, you know, the person and having credibility in the room. Part of that authenticity or integrity will be around how you show up and how you're known to be able to say to somebody, you know, is that the person that I would respect to give me that feedback? Because sometimes it won't be all that flash. And I think it is around that skill set, you know, being really good at it, because not everyone's really good at it. You know, that's also the key, and that's fine, but it's something that is not necessarily natural and it should be practiced.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and I would add to that, if we go into kind of like a slightly more niche skill on this one, other than the kind of listening skills and those kinds of things, is it kind of goes alongside the credibility piece, which is leadership, because you've got to have the confidence to step in and stop a conversation that's going awry. You've got to have the confidence to step in and correct like bad behavior, people interrupting each other, people being disrespectful. When emotions start to come into play and people get really upset, they're looking to you to be able to lead and direct the conversation, either to reschedule to another time if people have got too upset because you're not going to make progress then, or to step in and say, well, hold on, I'm really interested in what Alex has to say. Can you hold that thought until she's finished hers? So that you know how to interrupt and you know how to intervene. That would be my one.
And piggybacking on Lucy, strong emotional intelligence. You have to have strong self-awareness, strong self-management, strong relationship management, and just really clear and empathy skills. There's difference between being a leader and a manager. A manager focuses on tasks, systems, processes. Leaders focus on people, coaching, training, guiding, inspiring. And it's really important that if you have those strong emotional intelligence skills, understanding when your emotions are starting to get high and how to manage those, being able to recognize when someone else may not be verbally speaking how they feel, but you can see it on their face, their facial expressions, their body language, and being able to be in tune with that. I think that is a critical skill to being able to resolve conflict and work with others in resolving their conflict.
Mm.
Yeah, and I'll just close off on this. I agree with everything said. And the only two things I would add, in addition to the self-awareness, couple that with the experience. So this is 100%. You need to listen, be able to have listening skills, be emotionally intelligent, self-awareness. But one of the things is experience in navigating this, because things can get very charged. And if you don't have that confidence, I think it was Lucy that mentioned, an ability to respond to something that could be very unknown and unanticipated, it can derail you. You could be the person to derail, the conversation or the outcome. So the self-awareness with the experience to self-reflect whether you actually are the right person to lead the conversation. Do you have the right skill set at the right level in order to be the one to help navigate what can be very complicated waters? And when not the case, being humble enough to accept that and, get support and assistance, whether it's through your, whoever is the right person, whether it's your general counsel, your employment attorney, like whoever it is, like in order to help support you in the way you need, whether it's through coaching or rather through having someone else be the one to navigate.
Mm.
And can I say one thing to everyone? There is power in the silence. So sometimes you have to know when to hold them and you have to also know when to fold them. So, and that's an American term. So I just wanted to just say that, but there's a lot of power in the silence. You're not weak when you just and allow another person to emote.
Yeah.
It's okay for that. That's your holding space for the other person. Be okay with that. Sometimes that's necessary in conflict.
Yeah. There's this wonderful quote from a book. I'm looking at it. It's on a bookshelf. It's called Fierce Conversations, that says, "Let silence do the heavy lifting." So there's absolute power in silence. And I will just add to everything that all of you shared, something that I learned as a journalist, and I use it almost daily as I go about doing my change work. One critical skill could also be the ability to hold a paradox. And it's almost a natural progression from self-awareness and self-mastery, just the ability to hold a paradox. Now, 2 minutes out from saying goodbye, And this is the mic drop wrap up round. As you look back at some of the situations that you had to navigate, what is the biggest thing that you had to unlearn about conflict resolution? I will give you a few seconds to think about it. We will go clockwise. So we will go Dr. Gina, Lucy, Nikki, Alex. Please take a few seconds. I will just thank everybody in the audience for being here. We hope that you enjoy this just as much as we did. And also thank you, Jessa, for keeping us safe with everything tech and logistics. And Dr. Gina, what was your biggest unlearning?
That I'm going to end how I began, that conflict is a bad thing, that it was scary, that it should be avoided. I am not afraid. I grew up in a household where we had a lot of conflict, and conflict was scary, and I didn't want to engage in it. But now recognizing that it actually is a way to solve problems, I embrace it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Lucy.
Dr. Gina said this exactly the same one. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, same thing. That conflict is always a bad thing and is a negative thing, and it can be really amazingly beneficial to your teams. There's lots of great ways that you can help unearth healthy conflict in teams that are quite conflict averse, and that is just as big a job as helping to address toxic conflict that's gone awry.
Thank you, Nikki.
Oh, so many things. The one that I'll leave with is that that even though I mentioned experience as a skill, that because of my experience, that I actually could predetermine what someone's interest is and what the root cause was. Like thinking that I could use my experience to predetermine an outcome, or I had learned this very early on, that I have no idea sometimes what drives people, or the thing that would be the actual solution could be so minor in some cases, and something I would never have even thought about. So I'm thinking that I understand people's motivations before really listening.
Thank you. And the unlearning from the future, Alex.
I think it's more that what did I learn is this concept of time and investment in time to make sure that it's done once. So that's the part that I could leave you with, is that it is a really positive thing, conflict itself, if it is in its own treated respectfully with time.
Dr. Gina, Alex, Lucy, and Nikki, it was a joy. It was the absolute highlight of my day. Thank you so very much for being here. And I hope I will get to welcome all of you again very soon in other inspiring, validating, and also healing conversations. Thank you so very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good
to see you all.
Thank you.